This morning I'm going to meander through a bunch of different thoughts and personal opinions, and I don't ask that any of you buy into any of those thoughts or opinions. The whole reason I'm going to share them with you is to hopefully get you to think a little bit about things. If you look at your order of service, what's the message? Spiritual humanism. Have any of you ever heard that term before? A few of you. Well, the fact is, that's actually the name of a church. And you probably didn't know this, but that's actually the church where I was ordained. I knew early in my life I was probably going to be a minister at some point. And from the time I was 12, I went through a lot of years of theological training and conditioning. And the theology in which I was immersed in at that point in time, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't agree with it. I couldn't accept it. So I dealt with it sort of for years, kicked it around. And then I showed up here one day. And I heard something different than I'd ever heard in a church before. And I was asked to speak a few times, and I did. And I thought, now is time for me to be a minister. But I want to be ordained. So I started looking around, and I looked at religious science. At that time, Wayne Zamulin had the Religious Science Church in Roanoke Park, and I talked with Wayne at great length. And he was a certified instructor for the Religious Science School of Theology down by Fresno or someplace. And he showed me the curriculum and couldn't buy into it. They had this doctrine. Vivian went through Unity Village, and I acquired and amassed a whole library. It's in my office right now, 2 shelves linked of Unity books, study material. Didn't work for me. So I searched and searched, and I found this church called Spiritual Humanism. They don't have a doctrine. We don't have a doctrine. My opinion is that for something to work in your life, you have to be able to buy into it. You have to be able to wrap your head around it. What works for me can't possibly work for you. How many of us, give you a little demonstration, how many of us have gone to a Carnegie class or a self-help motivational class? How many of us have sold Tupperware or Amway? Oh, Avon, Mary Kay. We've all done that. We didn't make the fortunes, probably. And you know why? It's because you couldn't buy into the whole concept. It didn't work for you. And most of those things that I just mentioned are based on a concept of get somebody else to do all your hard work for you and sit back and count your money. Most of us don't have that mindset. because we wouldn't be here, sitting right here this morning, if we weren't dissatisfied with the, I'll call it dogma, that most facets of our society have. We prefer to think things through. What works in your life for you? Last week I talked about self-examination. When you think about your life and your experiences, you've learned some things the hard way, probably. Those are the lessons we remember the longest, the ones that hurt us the most. But you've brought your life experience, where you at right now, based on your decisions that seemed to work for you, that you could wrap your head around, that you could understand, that you could buy into. And we're all in a different place. I see these young people. I think back when I was young, I was very active in the scouting program, Boy Scouts of America. And while over the years I've developed some disappointment from time to time in some of their philosophy, I still think it's a great program for young people, the scouting program. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, maybe it's all one now, I don't know. They got very politically correct all of a sudden. But I know as a young man, it gave me an opportunity to think beyond the day-to-day going to school, being a kid stuff. It gave me an opportunity to learn things, the merit badge program, the different levels that you have to learn things and accomplish things to reach a different level, much like our regular day-to-day lives as we mature. I became an Eagle Scout. And the Scout Law, 12 points of the Scout Law, I only had trouble remembering it for 2/3 of my scouting career, because there was something that blocked me. But a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. All of those are great things except that obedient word. I've always had a problem with that. Because I couldn't buy into necessarily what somebody else told me. I think as we live in a community and society, there's some things we have to obey, the laws, the practices and customs within our society, within our demographic. But it just, I don't know, it just got on my mind that I can't buy into something that someone else thought up and is their opinion. When we look at these two words, spiritual humanism, what does that mean? I'm not sure. The word spirit or spiritual comes from a root word in Latin called spiritus. And literally it kind of means breath. Well, to me, it means the unseen, breath of life. Spirit is the unseen. As long as there have been humans, us two-legged mammalian creatures, we have been aware of the unseen. And theologists label that unseen, most of them, as God, this being. can't wrap my head around that so much. Some people can. But I think the unseen, this spirit, is something that you can't define or put parameters on or identify or call a being. How many times have we heard over the years, we are spiritual beings having a human experience? We've heard that. Most of us kind of buy into that. I have a problem with that. When we say a spiritual being, we are defining or putting definition to something that's unseen and unexplainable. We are spirit. I can buy that. We are made up of the unseen, and we are manifesting that unseen in a human life experience. Pretty much the same thing, just kind of nitpicking. And I'm not calling anybody right or wrong. I'm just offering maybe some question or some thought to think about. Maybe like Wayne said, maybe I'm making you uncomfortable. Well, good, think about it. I don't care what your thoughts are. I don't care what your opinions are. I certainly don't care whether or not you agree with me. In fact, I'm kind of delighted when I stand at the back and someone comes up and says, well, I don't exactly agree with what you said. Good. That means they listened and they are giving some thought to what I said. And that's why I'm standing here, is to encourage you to think. Figure out what works in your life. I happen to think that this unseen energy, Vivian calls it a sea of knowledge, that we are all part of. This undefinable, unseen spirit. I happen to think that the more we become aware of how much it interfaces in our day-to-day lives, the richer a life experience we're going to have. There is so much going on that we're not aware of. Look down at your hands. Just kind of look down at your hands. Not just look at your index finger. Would anyone, and you can have the rest of the day, and I'll stay and listen, can anybody explain to me the 7,836,000 things that are going on inside of that finger at this moment that you can't see? There is so much unseen, unexplainable going on within our bodies. And when it works well for us, when our thinking, when our decisions, when our lifestyles work well for us, I'll just guess 99% of the time, that means that we are in harmony with what we were designed and created to do and be. And the closer we look at what's going on in our world, the more thinking we do about it. You hear the word judgment a lot. I like to use the word help me out, discernment. Because when you discern, you just kind of consider it. And you can choose to embrace it or not embrace it or let it go, take it on. But you don't, judgment, you got to call it right or wrong, good or bad. And which one of us knows all about that? Do you know everything that's going to go on in your life that's good for you or bad for you? What's this finger going to do? But as we take a closer look, as we begin to understand a little bit and be a little more aware of how much participation this unseen has in our lives. If you would like an exercise in thinking, I watched a program Friday evening. I watch it almost every Friday evening. Some of you may not care for it much. If you'd like an interesting exercise in thinking, if you happen to catch the Bill Maher program, real time, this last Friday evening, he had some very interesting guests. And the last lady that came out toward the end of the show, she shared some information, thoughts, ideas, opinions. Not necessarily agree or disagree, but it caused me to really do some thinking. It gave me an opportunity to practice discernment. I was talking with someone the other day that said, oh gosh, I enjoy developing, or I want to develop spiritual practices. That means something different to every person in here. And you won't be able to decide what that is until you stop and think about it. I said earlier that spiritus was the Latin word for breath. Well, yoga is based on being conscious of your breath, being conscious of your muscle control and your body control, being conscious of these unseen things, how they're interacting in your own body at this moment. Meditation. It's another practice where we can become aware of the unseen, of our unseen breath, of all of the unseen processes that are going on in our body, the unseen knowledge that we possess, the unseen love and compassion. There's a lot of awful things happen on this planet, in this experience we call life. And as I look at that, and I use my gift of discernment, it can be very frustrating sometimes, cause anger. But there's a lot of good things that go on in this world as well. Thus our positive consciousness update. But if you just kind of look around at people, who are the people that seem to be enjoying their lives? Well, don't spew out hate and anger and anguish. They are the people who seem to be in harmony with their conscious, their subconscious, their bodies, their neighbors, their friends, their families. And when we're having that harmonious experience, what do you think we generate? What kind of aura comes up? What kind of energy comes out of your body? What kind of energy do your thoughts have? Do your looks have? Are you smiling or frowning? We all want to feel good and be happy. Well, think about when you're feeling good. What makes you feel good? You feel the very best, I'm betting and guessing, when you're having a harmonious interaction with your own heart, with your own mind, with your neighbor. Take a look. Before you establish beliefs based on somebody else's wanting you to be obedient, think first, what works out well for me? What can I understand? What can I wrap my head around? Because if you can't wrap your head around it, if you can't understand it, if you're not sure of it, but you take it on anyway, we're just like creatures that have been trained, like trick ponies. Like you train your dog. And my friends, most of us have a huge level of training in us. We have been conditioned and trained and conditioned and trained. So I'm hoping that all of us can take a real close look at ourselves and think about the unseen, the sea of knowledge, this undescribable, unseen thing we call spirit, and how much of it is available to us, how we can use it, how we can discuss it. Look at other people that seem to be having a pretty decent life. Talk to them. What's working for them? Oh, I never thought of that. Maybe that might work for me. Maybe I'll give that a try. Spiritual humanism. We're all human beings, but we are also spirit. And if you consider that for a while, it's really quite a beautiful thing.